In part 1 of this lesson, we demonstrated a wire-framing approach to page design, and ended up with this as our goal. Here's our logo and our title line, the rest of the page divided into 4 sections. First, activities run by our organization. Secondly, links to some pages and documents that might be of interest to our members. And then related organizations' activities of possible interest and our end-of-page information. Contact info, privacy policy, copyright notice, date last updated. We were then able to take our starter files, html_starter.txt and workstyles.css, to build the HTML file we call takayamaindex.html, which displays this way. In this session, we finish implementing our design. Adding committee events. Here's some code to demonstrate how we might list upcoming events for our committee. We have a paragraph, coming events / activities, and then a paragraph for each of 2 events, date and time, what it is, that sort of thing. It displays this way, which has several issues. The body text starts too high on the page. It should appear below the logo. Well, we can insert some blank lines. You recall P element with a amper, NBSP, semicolon, non-breaking space, to slip the text down the page. And the text itself is small and boring. Let's set the coming events / activities to be a different font, color, and style. Let's get the main text to be at least a larger font, and let's get some color to highlight the main point of each paragraph. So, we make some changes to the HTML body. We insert 4 blank lines, and on the coming events activities we add a class equals start, and on the actual activity of the events we add a class equals subpoint. Also, in each of the events we add a span with class equals red around the title or name of the activity. And then we have to add 2 rules to our style sheet. For start, let's set font family to be Comic Sans MS, or if you can't find that, use Fantasy. The font style to be oblique, so it'll be slanted a little bit. The font size to be 16 point with blue color and text decoration of underline. And then subpoint, margin left and margin right will each be 2M, so it'll be indented a little bit. And the font size 14 point with a font weight of bold. And now our page looks like this, which is better, but we can do more. I decided to add a facility to each event where the user could indicate an intent to attend, and this would set up an email to reach me. So now, taking a look at the first activity, I added this click with an href equals mail to and my email address. So click here to sign up, parenthesis, tell us who's coming, and get the address. Parenthesis, if the email link does not work for you, just send me an email directly, and there's my email address. And a similar thing for the second event. And this gives us this display, which is beginning to look a little richer and more interesting. Notice that we suggest a fallback if the mail to link doesn't work. It seems to be a problem in some systems, but it's not clear what the cause of the problem is. Adding links to papers. Next, I want to add some links to reference and planning documents as discussed in the previous video. Here's how I coded this part of the web page. Notice a blank line and then a series of paragraphs. First one is class equals start because that's sort of like the header for this section. So find out about the committee, calendar, budgets, and so on. And then a series of paragraphs with class equals subpoint, and we're pointing to the various documents, ending with a blank line. And our page now looks like this. Notice we now have more than can display on the screen, so this is a screenshot scrolled down to the bottom of the page so far. Notice there are references to 4 documents here. You must be sure these documents are uploaded to your server. Now, some samples are included in the docs subdirectory of the lab files, by the way. Adding events for other organizations. There are other organizations in town that our members relate to. In fact, there's almost 20 such organizations. Our approach is to be more collegial than competitive, and we try to inform our membership of events outside our committee that might be of interest to them. Here's some examples. Note, we use a slightly different layout to visually distinguish outside events from our events. So class equals start as sort of the header again, upcoming events and activities. And then paragraph, class equals subpoint, a new line, class equals subpoint, a new line. And so this displays this way. Again, just looking at the bottom of the page. By the way, those URLs are no longer valid, so they're just for demonstration. Notice how I put the dates at the top of these entries. Then it occurred to me it might also help to differentiate these entries if they were not the full width of the screen. So I added a new style rule to workstyles.css, .half plus width 60%, and then added that class to the entries for other organizations' activities. So here's our lead paragraph, the upcoming events, and then for the others I have class equals subpoint half plus, and now I have to put it in quotes with a space between them. And I do this for all the events, and now it looks like this, which I find interesting and pleasing. Adding end-of-page information. It lends a sort of gravitas to a web page if you supply some traditional information, usually at the bottom of the page. Contact information, name and email, phone number if you're up for it, usually a smaller font and normal weight as opposed to bold. Your privacy policy, a summary, small font, normal weight. And copyright information and the date and time the page was last updated. Again, small font, normal weight, centered. I ended up putting the first two items in the same paragraph. And then, because I thought it looked professional, I put these in a box using a div tag. So div class equals bottom box, and then here's our first paragraph with request to email us, and the second paragraph, our privacy policy, and then the end of the div. And then here's our class for our footer, which is our copyright and the last date of update. So I had to add some new style rules. So bottom box is margin left 15%, padding left 6 pixels, width 70%, and the border solid blue 2 pixels wide. The footer, margin of 10 pixels, 0 pixels, so that'll put a margin around it. Font size 10 pixels and text align center. Link, font size 8 point, and 10.5, font size 10.5 points, 10.5 points. And now we have this, which is pretty cool. But then I learned a new trick, how to round the corners of a box. Add a border radius property to your bottom box rule. Border radius colon 1m. And when I did this, it got even cooler. Notice the box has rounded corners now. Of course, you might want to experiment with different values for the border radius property. One more thing. There's still lots more work to do with this page, but I wanted to end this session by going back to the top H1 tag. Our page has gotten to include so much more than just our activities. Links to helpful content and activities of other groups, for example. We can reflect this content by adding a sort of subtitle, maybe like this. So here's our H1 with a class top logo, and then after we say welcome to the Denver Takayama Citrus City Committee Activities page, 2 BR elements. So we're going to insert a blank line, and then span class equals lesser. Our coming events, background, and related organizations end span. Now the 2 BR tags, as we said, insert a blank line before the following text. I created the lesser style rule to have a smaller font size, 18 point, than the H1 tag does by default, which is 22 point. The addition of the extra blank line and the following text allowed me to remove 2 of the blank lines we had inserted at first because of spacing issues on the page. So applying these changes and scrolling back to the top, we see this. Well, that's the process I went through. There's still more we can do, but we address that in later lessons. The versions of TakayamaIndex.html and WorkStyles.css that we ended this lecture with are available under the names 1 TakayamaIndex.html and 1 WorkStyle.css in the Advanced Web Files directory if you want to see the end products in their entirety. In this session, we saw the typical trial and error steps in fleshing out a web page. This may well involve updating your style sheet as well as your HTML code. We added one new style property, border radius, which actually I use a lot in my work. Coming up, in the next lesson, we begin looking at how to spiff up the background for your web pages by choosing a solid color, or a gradient of colors, or images. See you there.